Hello, chemists. Thanks so much for joining me for another one of our Chapter 2 videos. Michele Glass here, and today we're talking about hydrogen bonds. We mentioned earlier on that there are 3 types of chemical reactions. We've done one video on ionic, we've done one on covalent, and we're left with our hydrogen bond. Our hydrogen bond, we can use the catchphrase interactions. And I alluded to this in our last video after drawing water molecule, and we talked about the polarity, meaning that you have slight charges. And then remember, opposite charges attract each other. And so I said, hey, we're going to get some complexity here. Well, y'all, this is that complexity. Now, hydrogen bonds often involve the atom hydrogen. And the reason is because it's so tiny. We drew hydrogen in our last video. Remember, we see hydrogen as a proton surrounded by an electron. So it's our very smallest element in our periodic table of elements. And so what we often see is when hydrogen is involved, there is some polarity. So let's revisit our water molecule. And this time I'm going to draw it as oxygen with the single covalent bond to hydrogen. So I'm not going to draw it as the whole atom there. I'm going to use this method here. And remember, we said that oxygen is going to have slight negative charge. So we use the delta symbol to represent slight. And then the hydrogen is going to have slight positive charges. Okay, so if we're going to draw another water molecule, we want to position it such that the negative charge of the oxygen is closest to the positive charge of the hydrogen. And so we get this like attraction here. If I draw another water molecule here, I might go this way with it. Hydrogen bonds are typically shown as like a dashed line. I could do another one. And so what we end up with is this chain of these a chain of these water molecules linked together by these hydrogen bonds. So everything that I've done in this dashed white line is showing out as a hydrogen bond. It's basically the attraction between charges. Now, because water molecule is polar, and it's our classic example of a polar molecule, you have to know this, right? Because water is polar, we see that water is what we call a universal solvent. And the term solvent means dissolver. And the reason is because of water's polarity. So when we talk about solubility, we're talking about, does something dissolve in something else? We use the phrase likes, dissolve, likes. So that means polar dissolves polar. And then the opposite of that would be true. Nonpolar dissolves nonpolar. And so what we see is because water is a polar molecule, we see because hydrogen bonding can show up, water can act as this great solvent. So it can dissolve anything else that's polar. It can also dissolve anything that has a charge. So we're going to see ions. We're going to see what we can also call electrolytes dissolving well in water because of water's polarity. We'll talk more about that as we go through. For now, hydrogen bonds, we're just looking at these interactions between slight charges with polar molecules. Stay tuned for our next video on metabolism. And as always, take care of yourselves. and each other.